The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we'll review the Minnesota United match in depth. We'll preview the two matches this week against San Jose and Houston, and we'll also cover a few other bits of Austin FC news. My name's Landon Cottom, and I am not joined by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley. He is out of town right now, so I am joined once again by Mr. Chris Wellhausen.
Hello. I'm back again, baby. 2 for 2 these weeks.
So Jeremiah texted me this morning and told me happy birthday and said that it's a great day to go full Wellhausen.
One day I feel like one of my family members is just going to stumble into this like pit of Twitter where that's becoming a saying and be so alarmed by my life choices. I'm definitely, my whole family is not like this. They would be very alarmed to hear sayings like
that. So I just want to take a minute to say thank you to all the folks on Twitter and sending me text messages and messages in various places telling me happy birthday today. I think we get like we all know each other and all are kind of gathering around this soccer team, right? And so I think we get stuck into the soccer stuff a lot, and sometimes I kind of forget that one of the best parts of all of this has been the community that's been built around this. And today was a really great reminder of that, and kind of a little trip down memory lane of all the people that I've met over the last few years. And so thank you all for reaching out. And I look forward to making some more memories over the next few years.
Yeah, man, it's been really sweet seeing everybody wish you happy birthday. On a similar note, I just wanted to make a quick note here. My half birthday was actually pretty recent and no one said a thing. So thanks, guys, for giving Landon all the love. It's a pretty big half birthday for me. So whatever. I guess we should just talk about some soccer or something now.
I guess so. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you, Chris.
Yeah, you were one of them that forgot, Landon. So just saying.
I'll try to make it up to you somehow. All right, let's jump into reviewing the 0-1 loss to Minnesota. So Austin dominated this game statistically. Possession was 66-34, which we've discussed on the show before. Possession has rarely meant that much for Austin, but it came along with 19 shots, 8 shots on target, which was 19-12 in shots, and then 8-3 in shots on target. We also had more crosses, more corners. We won more duels, but scored 0 goals. And so I know in the last show you were on, or maybe we were talking not on the show, you were kind of pining for a little bit of a throwback to early season tactics and form. Is this what you were talking about, where we get a bunch of chances and don't score any goals?
Yeah, it feels good to be back. No, I do think it is a good example or kind of reminder, because it's like a heightened version of what we saw at the beginning of the year, right? Like we've got better pieces, and Gite and Driussi kind of elevating that game, and we looked good. I referenced that because I think early in the season we looked competitive in every game, and I missed that. But we looked more than competitive. I mean, on the replay too, we looked like the better team in a lot of ways, and I really did kind of strike me as one of those games where if just one of those shots went in, or Tyler Miller wasn't Superman for the night, it could be a way different discussion.
So in the post-game press conference, Josh Wolff said that he was happy with how they played, and said like they played a good game, just the chances didn't fall. After watching it, will we call this a good game? I'm not really. I've seen people push back against that, and I don't really know how to think about it at this point.
I think I can already hear people replying after the contrast between last week's episode and this, what I'm about to say, is going to be very noticeable.
I guess let's not say a good game because we lost, so it's not a good game, but a good performance.
No,
can we call this a good performance?
I think you can call it a good performance. And you got to take it in context. Minnesota is a good team, and they played what I think is their strongest starting 11. And they're fighting. They're, of all the teams in the league, they have some of the most to fight for right now, right? They're on the playoff line. they're going to come in hot. It is upsetting we didn't at least get a tie, but it's a good performance. It's, that's just how the game works sometimes is it just doesn't fall your way. And I do actually agree a lot with Josh. And I liked his quotes in the press conference of saying the team shouldn't be disappointed. They should be pissed off. I loved that because that's exactly how they should feel. And he should be the one like getting that out of them, is saying like, you played well and I'm going to defend you in this press conference in the media and kind of keep the attention on me with these big quotes and then go out on Wednesday and give it to him, because like you deserved more than you got today. And I think he's right.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at the shots that were taken, just a rough count, it looks like 9 of the shots were from inside the box, which again, like Wolff is right. We were getting into some really good spots. We got some really good chances that players just kind of scuffed or didn't take well and didn't finish them. So let's run through some of those chances real quick. So early on, I think Cecilio had one about the 8th minute and Jhohan had one about the 10th minute. And then not long after that, Driussi almost scored a banger in the 11th minute. He tried to put it on a postage stamp, that top left corner, and it was just wide, but that would have been amazing if he would have scored that one.
Yeah, it was really good. And I mean, that first 10 minutes, it was like we were all over them and we're suffocating them. It was ridiculous. I mean, you talk about wanting it more or even just being set up well, and both of those to the full degree. I mean, a little credit to Josh Wolff. They came out hungry.
Yeah, so fortunes kind of changed a little bit in the 15th minute. So Minnesota was attacking. Fragapane plays a square ball across the top of the box. Alex Ring easily picks it off. There's a little bit of pressure on him, so he turns and is going to drop it back to a center back. He doesn't see that when Fragapane noticed that Ring was going to pick that ball off, Fragapane continues the run and kind of follows the ball and is going to go back and press the center back so Ring wouldn't have an outlet there. Ring does not notice this. He turns, plays a really gentle ball back to Cascante. Fragapane easily cuts it out. He lays it. He combines with a few guys. It opens up Reynoso for a left-footed shot at the top of the box. Stuver saves it, but he's only able to kind of like parry it back out. Hassani Dotson picks it up, plays a hard ball across the top of the 6, and it goes past several Austin FC defenders, finds Fragapane again on the far post, and he slots it past Stuver. So this whole play started with that Ring giveaway, but I was watching it trying to pick out who exactly else was at fault. Like, do you have any ideas on that?
I do. When I rewatched the play, and while it's his fault for letting that situation unfold, it was certainly a situation you could have salvaged more from. I mean, again, talking earlier about our chances not going in, that just being part of the game, like if Stuver deflects that just a little wider or holds on to it, maybe the whole result's different. But in the same way, the one thing that really frustrated me was watching once he kind of squares it, or I think once he hits it towards and Stuver deflects it, all of our defenders are just ball watching. I think Romaña started to step towards, but was just so far from where the ball ended up. But Cascante and I think Kolmanich were the ones behind him, and they just were completely still, which you've got to be more active when you're that close to your goal. And that was pretty frustrating. I think they both individually kind of failed there.
Yeah, I think there were 2 players behind them in that moment, and you'd think they need to at least be aware that they're there. And it looked like Cascante, maybe if he were reacted a little bit quicker to that cross, could have cut it out and maybe cleared it. But
yeah, I think that's an instance where you got to be just checking your shoulder, like you're paranoid, right? I mean, one of them at least. And normally I think Ring is the guy that's more central and carries out wide to pick up those runs, but obviously he's trying to make up for his mistake, and we know he gets kind of hot once he's pissed off, and I think it kind of carried him in the wrong direction, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think overall Kolmanich had a decent game. He put in some really dangerous crosses, carried the ball fairly well, but this is one of those areas of his game that he still needs to mature a little bit in, is kind of that. And the other one that I would have mentioned earlier on the season is that kind of the toughness in defending, and I feel like he's improved in that. I think he's getting better at that. But that awareness in the box right there, I think we've seen him maybe react a little bit slow a few times this season. So Hopefully that's a lesson learned for him. There was a controversial moment in the 27th minute that a lot of people were calling for a back pass by Gasper. I think it was, I don't remember if it was a shot or a pass, but Chase Gasper was kind of recovering into the box, sticks a leg out, the ball hits his leg, and it goes straight to Tyler Miller, who picks up the ball with his hands. Did you think there's anything in that?
So this is where I have to humble brag to give my perspective. So I was actually photographing the game for Los Verdes. And so I was on the field and I was behind the goal when that happened. And it didn't register because it happened so quick. And I just glanced over my shoulder to see, because I could hear, the noise getting higher as they were getting closer. And it looked 100% like a pass. I mean, you can see it's, that rule is a little gray to me of where the line is drawn, but I mean, you see him kind of square up and get his foot just right. So it's just gentle enough. I mean, it wasn't like a deflection off of his foot or some sort of ricochet.
I think it was a deflection. So thinking back, I think it was a through pass. I think somebody was making a run behind Gasper there. And so the rule with the back pass is it has to be an intentional backwards pass to the keeper. Therefore, deflections don't count. So if he was trying to make a play on the ball and it happens to bounce off his foot and then go to the keeper, it's not a back pass. And I honestly think that's what was happening. I think, I can't remember the exact situation, but I think there was a player making a run in behind. Gasper's just lunging to get anything on it, and he does, and it goes to Miller. So I think you maybe could have called it, but I think it would have been a little bit harsh on Gasper to call a back pass there.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I guess we'll just have to go with whoever was closest on the field. So probably right on this one.
There are several good chances in the second half. So I think one of the better ones was Kolmanich in the 52nd minute. Pochettino ends, I think maybe Fagundes sets him up to make a little driving run into the box with the ball. He squares it into Gite. Gite plays a really clever little flick behind him to set up Kolmanich at the top of the, just outside the 6-yard box, maybe just inside the 18. And he tries to hit it and just pulls it super wide and gets nowhere close. But he was set up to have a really good opportunity where the keeper didn't know which way he was going to go. I think he tried to hit it with his left foot, and with the angle, I'm starting to realize that he plays the ball with his left foot a lot of times when maybe he shouldn't, and should just play with his weaker foot. So maybe that's another weakness we found in this game, is him just being very one-footed. But I kind of feel like at that angle, if he'd hit it with his right foot and even just tried to place it, he would have done a little bit better there. But really, really big missed opportunity in that moment.
I think those two moments, though, you just described is a good, echo of what we were saying earlier, and it being a good performance, because it's weird to say that, right? Because they're two bad misses, but as a unit, the chance creations were really good. They were both in great positions. We moved the ball really well to get to that point. And even if you kind of freeze frame around them, they're not alone in the box. I think in that, Pochettino miss, we were 3 for 3 of attackers versus defenders. We were crashing the box really well, which I know Wolff's been crying out for. So I think it's a sad case of guys not taking their opportunities well enough and kind of seizing the moment. But as a unit, we were set up really well. And you listed the amount of shots earlier, but on target, but even the ones some that were off target were really, really good chances.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are several other Austin chances that I think we'll maybe touch on in some of the individual player discussion, but Minnesota almost made it 2-0 in the 88th minute, or maybe a little bit later than that. But Fragapane had not quite point blank because the angle was a little bit strange and there's a defender there, but a chance really close to the goal that he skied over the top of the bar. And then right in kind of the dying seconds, Cascante had a header that was floating towards the top corner, and Miller was able to save it. But that ended up being kind of the last chance of the game before the final whistle. So jumping into some of the individual player performances, we can kind of move through the whole team and talk about players that we thought are worth noting. But I want to start with the center backs. I think They both looked a little bit uneasy at times on the ball, but they also both played some really good line breaking passes, and they were both pretty solid defensively. I thought this was one of the games where our defenders had the fewest mistakes. I know we just essentially said they didn't do good enough on that goal, but it was kind of a combination of several small mistakes as opposed to one huge mistake, which is what we've been seeing a lot over the course of the season.
And there are mistakes that, you know, you can clean up after. Like you said, they weren't like so egregious that it was like, oh my God, the second it happens, you know, you're just like absolutely screwed. But one player in particular out of the center backs is I've been really impressed with Romaña lately. You know, like week over week, I feel like in the past couple of months, I've noticed a lot of improvement. And this game is a good example. I mean, that one recovery play he made where I can't remember if he had kind of made the mistake or if someone had put him in a bad position, but someone had basically broken through the back line and was driving in on goal. And he fully recovers, takes the ball, and then hits the ball back as he's sliding out of bounds to ricochet it off the attacker.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And I was just like, again, that was, you know, I was kind of fortunate. I just glanced over my shoulder and I was basically where he hit that ball. I was right there. And I've never seen such a incredible like defensive play that close. And it was inch perfect. It was kind of remarkable to watch it from the angle I got. But he's been great. He's really, I mean, he looks better on the ball in general. I think, like you said, I think he's making a lot better passes. And I love that he's, you know, not afraid to carry the ball forward a little bit at times, which we're seeing more frequently.
And he does that pretty well, actually. Like,
right?
He's like surprisingly like secure when he's dribbling with the ball, which is, you see it once and you think maybe it's a fluke, but he's done it several times now and like does it pretty well.
He gives me a lot of hope for the future because it seems like we're starting to see him really evolve as a defender, which in year one is impressive, especially switching to MLS, which a lot of defenders who aren't familiar with the league really struggle to adjust. But you got to think if we give him a really strong pairing and he continues to grow like this, like that's a good defensive setup down the road. But I've been really enjoying watching his game grow, and it's been really encouraging. I think he was one of the bright spots of the night.
Yeah, he still needs to clean up some of his off-ball defending because he has made quite a few mistakes in the most recent games. So just ball watching or kind of falling asleep on the backside, but a lot of really strong things from him. I kind of want to point out a tactical thing that I noticed while we're talking about the center back. So I kept noticing that Minnesota, they weren't pressing super high all the time, but they were pressing. And I kept noticing that our tins, Driussi and Pochettino, weren't always very quick to drop back and help building out of the back. And I wasn't really sure why. I was thinking maybe that Pochettino just wasn't doing it. But after the rewatch, I kind of think this was maybe under instruction from Wolff. I think he was asking the center backs to be the ones to break that press. And that maybe they were the ones being a little bit hesitant to do it, because as the game moved on, you start seeing them trying to find those line breaking passes and making them pretty often. And then also you saw both of them kind of sidestep a defender and then drive forward themselves. And I kind of think that's what Wolff wants them to do, which is like positional play is all about creating advantages, numerical advantages or skill advantages, whatever it is. But if you leave those tins high, if Ring and the center backs can break that first line of the press, then you have your best attacking players further up the field. I could see that being a thing that Wolff instructed them to do. It's a little bit risky, but we saw it kind of work a few times as far as moving the ball forward. But I think both Jhohan and Cascante did fairly well doing that for the most part.
That's super interesting to note too, because it's like kind of fascinating, like tactical wrinkle. Because if you think about it too, something I've noticed and didn't think too much of is early in the season, I really wanted to see us keep our fullbacks further back when we were kind of passing the ball around like that, just to have more options out wide, which I feel like I've slowly seen more and more of in kind of subtle ways. But if you think about it, in the beginning of the season, if you're bringing your 10s back, you have to play out through the middle, and it kind of invites their midfield to come further forward and press much more aggressively, because just by nature of tracking their man, they've got more bodies in our half. Whereas if you do the opposite and you're kind of spacing it out wide, but even more so keeping those 10s further up the field, it kind of makes their midfielders say, like, you either have to commit to this press, and if you mess up, we outnumber you on the counter, which is what the whole point of building out of the back is like kind of create a counter attack by inviting them in, right? And it gives you more options to just kind of play sideline to sideline with your fullbacks a little more tucked in, which I had not connected those dots, but that's a really interesting adjustment. And hopefully we see more of that, because I think it worked really well. Because I remember feeling like Minnesota was, well, they're not an out and out pressing team. They were really aggressive, and they clearly were fighting for it. And I thought we played really well through that at a lot of points. So that's a good observation. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that's really defined going forward, especially this week, which we'll talk about later against San Jose, which has got such a distinct style of play that could really expose.
So a player who I thought maybe didn't have a great night was Cecilio Dominguez. What was your take on his performance?
This is maybe like the only time I'll get hot with my takes tonight. It's funny. I think when people talk about like Wolff in or Wolff out, it's always a discussion of, is it on the manager or is it on the players for not being good enough? And I think tonight's a good example. And I say this as someone who literally last week was arguing for Wolff out. We as a unit looked really well. Like, people were positioned really well. They were fighting really hard. There's a lot of things I can credit Wolff for in this game, start to finish. But players like Dominguez just did not live up to the billing tonight. I mean, he had multiple chances that he just wasn't sharp enough. He was maybe overthinking. Took too many dribbles. And, we'll talk about Driussi more later. He was great. It's like he doesn't put a foot wrong. And that's how Alex Ring is a lot too. But you need your big players to be like that in those moments. And the weight can't all be on one DP. You have three for a reason, because if one guy's just not finding the net, you need one of the other two to really step up and claim it. I thought Dominguez had multiple points where it was like, this is the moment. You want your DP in that spot to take it. And he just didn't. And it kills me because it's so close, but it's just not there.
He wasn't bad either, like, is the thing. Like, he didn't make a bunch of huge mistakes. It wasn't like a full on like negative performance, but whenever he's the second highest paid player on the team, it's not good enough, and it needs to be better than that. He needs to be big in those moments. And so he did end up kind of creating a few chances that were good, but I feel like a lot of times I think you hinted at this, but there are moments where we kind of had them in transition and we'd find Cecilio out wide, and in these moments he needs to decide, like, am I taking this guy on? And if he is, then do it, and if he's not, move the ball. And there's a lot of times where he would receive it and he's like, okay, I'm not going to take this guy on. And he's just like kind of surveyed the landscape for a while. And like, this isn't your job, Cecilio. Let other guys survey the landscape. Your job is to receive the ball, either take the guy on or don't take the guy on. And he would slow down these transition moments where it wasn't the moment to do that.
Yeah, I think what's really tough with him, and I love Cecilio. He's got such a great character, and he clearly works hard, and I want him to succeed. But what's so hard with him is he kind of deceives, right? Like, his work rate's typically very good. He's in good positions. He has these kind of flashy moments sometimes, and he's like, this game, he has shots that are really close, and you're like, oh, if it's just a little better next time, I bet he's got it. But the problem is, this deep into the season, I just don't know if I've seen like a real DP moment from him. Even in what was the game we just played a few weeks ago? He got 2 goals.
Was it RSL?
I think it was. There's too many games going on at once. But even against RSL in that game, they're good goals and he's in the right spot at the right time, but it wasn't like he just took a guy on and absolutely like scorched him and made something of nothing, right? Like, you want your DPs to show up and do. And I don't know, the more I watch him, the more I just start to feel like he's kind of a low budget Carlos Vela, right? Like, in those moments, that's why Vela gets paid what he does, because he takes them and he'll take the guy on. He thinks and makes decisions quickly. And I just always see him like, oh, he's out wide, just in the same kind of position I watch Vela take advantage of. And time after time, he just dribbles too much, or he waits too long, or he takes the shot when maybe he should have waited a little bit longer and tossed a through ball to the late runner. And it's frustrating. And, in the same sense, we were talking about maybe Wolff has a lot of pressure at the start of next season. I think guys like him will have a lot of pressure too, because that's a lot of money in a really crucial spot if he's not going to be the big guy in those big moments, we got to get someone else who will, because in games like this, he should be winning it for us.
Yeah, I'm not ready to call it a day on him because he's been playing out of necessity, out of position for almost the whole season. And so I think we should give him some time to settle in over there and find his role in the team and know like when is the time to do what. I think it's going to be kind of his nature to be a little bit mercurial. He's going to be really hot sometimes and not so great sometimes. I think that's just the kind of player he is. But I think as the rest of the team kind of settles in and everyone finds their spots, I think Cecilio could have a role in this team that could end up being really dangerous. But we're not always seeing it right now.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not saying we should be eager to get him out the door or anything. I just do think that the beginning of next season, there should be a big spotlight on him because, we talk about giving players time to adjust, and that applies to DPs too. But the adjustment has to happen next season. We've got to see some more of those moments where it could have been a 1-0 loss, or it could have been a tie game that he makes into a win, or he pulls one back for us and he takes that big moment and rises to the occasion. I want to see more of that from him. And hopefully we start to, like you said, now that he's in his natural position and he's got pieces that kind of equip him to play better around him. But yeah, it's frustrating in games like this because you want him to be that guy, and he's so close to being that guy with some of his chances and shots, but he's just not right now.
Sebastian Driussi, I thought again really good. Like kind of, I think whenever it was still a rumor, I think I may have either fairly or unfairly called him the rich man's Diego Fagundes. And I feel like Sebastian Driussi and Diego Fagundes are similar in that they can have like a pretty solid game and you don't necessarily notice them that much.
No, I think
that's fair.
I still think it's a really accurate description because A, respect to Fagundes, he's a baller. But B, yeah, Driussi is just like, I have a moment. This is what happens every single game, Landon, at least lately, is I watch the game. I don't notice Driussi directly, like you just said. And then if I'm rewatching highlights or I'm rewatching the game, or even just after when I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, man, what a player. He's everywhere. And you could make a drinking game of like how many mistakes he makes and be able to drive home just fine, right? Like he's so sharp and effective. And I feel like his work rate is what really elevates him in my mind. Just because to have that much skill, but then to force yourself into situations and fight for the ball. And I mean, he's just like a workhorse, man.
I think he's so intelligent with his movement, with his running, that he can work that hard in the right moments, and he's not wasting any of that energy because he's almost always in the right spot. And so he can afford to work that hard because he knows he's going to use that energy in an effective and efficient way.
But I think part of it too is, and I totally agree with you, but I think part of it too is he can just run. I mean, he seems like he's in a full sprint at all times. And part of that may be to, like you said, he's just knows when to turn it on and when to wait. But I'm not used to seeing a player of his skill level that is so clearly on a different playing field than the rest of the people on the pitch, that also puts in such consistent work. I mean, he seems to really, really care. And I love it. I love him. I love him so much. He's perfect.
So he seemed to maybe take either a couple of different knocks, or maybe it was the same one a few times, but he was moving a little bit slowly towards the end of the game. We'll talk about rotations as we get into the previews of the next game, but I'm a little bit concerned that maybe that will be a lingering issue. Hopefully not, but hopefully he do an ice bath and come out of that one just fine. Alex Ring. I feel like Alex Ring still did a few really good things, primarily defensively. I feel like he still made some really important tackles. But on the ball and attacking, I feel like this was one of his worst games of the season, probably.
Can I ask you though, because I saw a lot of people say like, oh, this was Ring lost it for us tonight. He was so bad, or this, that, and the other. Like, do you think if he doesn't make that one big noticeable mistake, we even comment on him? Because
I think a lot of people probably don't comment on it, but I don't think that changes the fact that it wasn't a great game from him. He was pretty rough on the ball for the most part.
Yeah, and maybe I trust your eye over mine when watching the game, but I don't know. And maybe it's just that he is so good that even a decent performance just looks bad by our standards of him. But I don't know. When I rewatched it, I wasn't really frustrated with him outside of that one moment. I thought he had a lot of positive contributions, and yeah, maybe not as sharp as he normally is. But if that were Pereira, we probably would have still called it a really good game for him, right? And I think it just shows like how high the bar is for Ring that he's kind of set for himself by just being so good. But yeah, I agree with you. Maybe not one of his best performances, but the caveat I put is I still think he was pretty good. And I think if it weren't for that big mistake, people wouldn't be as focused on him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of counting, and it got over like 5 or 6 mark where he played a pass that wasn't on target and turned it over, or got the ball kind of caught up under his feet and didn't carry it the right way as he should have and turned it over. So there were several moments where he was the direct cause for giving Minnesota the ball.
And that's exactly why I say I trust your eye over mine. There's no damn way I'm counting passes.
Who else we got? Tomas Pochettino. What do you think of his performance?
I really liked it. I'm scared to say that before you give your opinion now after that. Just like totally stat bombed me there. But what I really liked about him is his work rate has been really good. But I saw in a lot of moments he really pushed and made the run. It seemed like no one else wanted to keep the play alive, especially out wide. Like I think Wolff's talked about a little bit. He's got to choose the right moments when to drift wide and when to stay to his position. And Wolff said he's seen some improvement there of not just kind of free roaming on his own, but sticking to the plan. And I thought he picked his moments really well. There's a few times the ball kind of trickled out wide, and if he doesn't make the run, it turns over and they can hit us on a counter, but he recovers it. And, he distributes the ball really well in that final third to keep the play alive. And I think if you go back and watch, a lot of those really good chances in some way can be traced back to him and just his willingness to go get the ball and make something happen of it and kind of calmly make the right either cross in or just subtle pass to position us better. And I thought it was a good game. He had that big miss as well. So that's, noteworthy. In the same way I'm judging Cecilio, I think you got to give a little judgment to him. But the difference I see between those two players in a game like this is Cecilio is more of the attacker, and he is that kind of take a guy on, make something happen kind of player. And so I expect more of that from him. And I think Pochettino contributes kind of like Driussi maybe in so many little ways too, that yeah, it's frustrating when he doesn't hit those big chances. I know he had one really bad miss, but he contributed really positively in so many other ways. But I mean, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I think, Wolff has brought up his kind of movement and decision making several times throughout the course of the season. It seems like they're kind of finding a middle ground between what Pochettino wants to do naturally and what Wolff wants him to do. And it seems like he is kind of moving in ways that Wolff wants him to at this point. And he's getting in the box more often, which I feel like him playing centrally, he seems to be able to do that a bit more naturally in that position. His defensive work continues to impress me. He makes really hard tackles, seems to be in really good positions a lot of times whenever we're defending, which is early on in the season, I did not really expect to be saying that about him, but his defense has impressed me. My biggest complaint about Tomas Pochettino is that he just tries to do a little bit too much sometimes. And there was a moment early in the game where he was dribbling, and it was one of those you dribbled maybe a little bit too far and got away with it, and he had Cecilio out on the touchline open. And he could have just played a very easy pass to him and kept the play alive and maybe continue to run and open up some space for Cecilio to drive into. And instead, he tries to do a spin move and turn into those two defenders and split them and drive himself, and he loses the ball. And he did little things like that a few times last night and has done it in every game he's ever played in for Austin. And it's little moments like that where it's just like, keep it simple. Like don't force it. Live to fight another day and keep the play alive and open up some space with a run, or just play the simple pass and keep the play alive.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because I feel like when we signed him, I was just like everybody, like diving deep into the highlight reels. And a lot of those highlights were moments where he does kind of drive through a lot of defenders. And basically that situation plays out positively for him. And I wonder if it's just a adjustment thing and maybe one of those final pieces that hasn't set into place of him in this league. But it's funny you say that, because I remember that being something I was like, oh, what a good strength to have of this guy that can just carry the ball forward and really beat a few guys and make all that space. And he does
it sometimes, but I think that's why it was a highlight reel. Like they're not going to put the times it doesn't work. And I think it's just a matter of picking his moments and knowing when to do it and when to lay up essentially and play the easy pass. So
totally. But I think that's part of it, right? Is, you'd hope a player like that, as he adjusts more in the league, he gets more mature with that decision making.
Yeah.
And even more so too, as they get more familiar with the system, now that we have all the pieces in place, maybe he just naturally knows when there's going to be a guy there and maybe isn't spending just a half second to think about, oh, I'm just going to take it because I'm not sure, like maybe in those moments, it's just a little more natural. Oh, I know Ceci's going to be out wide, or I know Jite is going to be hanging just off my corner. Like, let me dish it off to him. Right. So I think it's definitely worth noting, but it's one of those things that I think could easily be fixed as they adjust more to their positions in the system, and also just players like him to the league.
So the last player I want to talk about briefly is Moussa Jite. So I feel like they maybe struggled to find him as often as they would have liked to, but they found him in they played the ball to him in some pretty precarious situations that he was more often than not able to find his way out of, or at least play a safe pass back. But yeah, I mean, I wish we could have seen more from him, or they could have found him more often. But I feel like with what he was given, he actually performed pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's another game where you look at him and you just say, like, you see how much he offers outside of just goals. Like, he really has a big presence, and you could see him, like, you can't ignore him when we're that far up the field. And I think it's, that piece we've been missing all year of, he draws guys in and they have no choice, because he's so physical and he's so good on the ball that, maybe not always so good on the ball, but I think in the final third, he's so dangerous that you can't ignore him. And it kind of forces the defense to make a decision. And even in moments where we couldn't quite find him, I think he opened up a little space by just being that presence that they had to be mindful of.
Yeah, absolutely. One moment, I wish we could see him getting more shots. And in the 71st minute, he got a shot off at the top of the box that it was, I can't remember how he got it, but it was the ball got played into him pretty like hard at one point, and it popped up in the air, and then it like went off a defender and fell to him. And he just turns and is able to get this really quick shot off and blasts it. And it might have been going over anyway, but Miller, to be safe, had to push it over the top of the bar. But just the quickness and the power he was able to get on a shot in that position is really exciting. And that's another thing I want to see more of, is just getting Moussa in shooting positions and letting him get shots off, because a guy who can release that quickly and hit it that hard is going to score some goals.
Well, you got to note too, we kind of mentioned it a little throughout, like Tyler Miller, the Minnesota goalkeeper, had a great game.
He was very good. That's true.
That was a moment. He had a really nice save. Whether it was going over or not, he forced it there. Could have bounced back into a more dangerous position off the crossbar. But even earlier in the game, Jite had like a just dead on header that he got really good contact on, and Miller made an amazing save to keep that out. I mean, like, again,
I think maybe the best one that he made was early in the game, maybe like 10th minute. Driussi plays Cecilio through the middle, like a little slip pass through the middle. Miller has to come off his line. Cecilio tries to chip him. And on one of the replay angles, you can see like Miller is diving to his left, has an arm outstretched to his right and saves the ball with that right hand as Cecilio tries to chip him. And so, yeah, overall, really good game. And if he's not as on his game, maybe we sneak in one of those goals. But yeah, excellent performance by him. So let's get into some of our overall thoughts and takeaways from the game. So like we said, the system seemed to be working fairly well. We got a lot of shots from pretty good areas, just not able to finish them. Let's get into the subs. What were your thoughts on the substitutions in this game? Did you want to see them come in earlier?
I don't know. And I think it's what's really tough with this one. I don't know if there's a clear solution, and maybe that's credit to Josh to some degree, because we looked really competitive throughout the whole game. I don't think there's one player other than Dominguez that you could single out as like really just not quite up for that night. And even like you said, he wasn't that bad. I will say about the subs, because I don't know if I honestly have an opinion on if I wish they'd come in earlier or not. I can see the rationale for both wanting them a little sooner and leaving the guys on because they were playing well. But I do like that we brought on so much speed. That feels like a smart substitution. You're bringing on guys like Gaines and Gallagher and Mane even. It's like Minnesota played hard and that was very noticeable, and they clearly are tired and playing away. Like, yeah, bring on some pace and stretch them. I don't think we quite took advantage of that enough.
It didn't seem like we really knew how to use it, right?
Right.
We would launch some long balls, but they were kind of predictable, and Minnesota didn't really have any trouble with any of them. And so I feel like we need to come up with kind of that plan B where like speed is the plan, but you still need to be smart as to how you're utilizing that and not just launching it and hoping Mackenzie Gaines can run onto it.
And this is a weird comment I did not expect to make on the show, but I think this is a game where if Hussein's healthy, you sub him in and say, you're going to distribute to these wingers who are going to make these bold runs forward.
Yeah.
And that's what he's really good at. Maybe where he lacks in some of GT's skill sets, I think he can do that really well, especially as a late sub. And then if you've got Gaines or Mane or Gallagher out wide and just say, like, you make the through run every time and just get it to Hussein, he's going to dish it forward. I bet you get a couple really good chances out of that.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So one other thing I wanted to reference was very prominent chance of "Ref, you suck" started up in the 79th, 80th minute after a penalty shout on I think what maybe should have been a foul against GT. What was your overall impression of the performance of the officials on that night?
My only opinion on that chant is I wish we had done it longer. It's hard. I'm sure a lot of fans feel like this because there have been a lot of really bad ref performances against us. And at some point you start to feel kind of crazy, right? You're like, how does it keep happening? Like, surely it can't always be this bad. But this game, it was one that there's so many moments you're like, how? It just seems obvious. And it was really frustrating. I thought the chants were deserved personally. And if you got a whiff too, when the refs were walking off at the end of the game, I mean, such loud boos. You could see them too, kind of like, let's pick up the pace, guys.
Yeah.
Like, we gotta split. But yeah, it's another bad reffing performance, which is frustrating. And I get that's just part of the game, but I thought the ref had a bad night.
I think there were a lot of moments that he got booed for or got yelled at for that were probably fair calls, but because he had made a bad call before that, like, that's the reaction you're going to get. And so I don't think it was as many bad calls as a lot of Austin fans would say it was, but there were definitely a few in there and some of them pretty big ones. So, yeah, I wasn't super happy with that. So this loss actually puts Austin FC mathematically out of playoff contention. I don't know that we were in it really anyway, but
what's your overall take, I guess, on the game in general then? Because there's a lot of points you could take from it, right? Like, we're officially out of playoff race. It's a game lost at home, but at the same time, it's a good team and they've got a lot to play for. And the team played well. So, I mean, like overall, like how do you kind of feel about it?
A little bit mixed because I feel like there were quite a few moments from lots of different players that were pretty sloppy and could have been a little bit cleaner. But overall, like it's hard to argue with the kinds of shots we were getting and looking at the location of the shots we were getting. It's just really, it feels like the beginning of the season where it's so frustrating to not be able to finish any of them. And we kind of hoped that would change whenever we brought in these players, but it wasn't any of those players that missed them, was it? It was the guys who have been here all season were the ones that were missing those, not necessarily easy chances. I don't think any of them were easy, but ones you should at least be putting on target, and they weren't doing it. So I think overall a pretty decent performance. Just it was a lot of things were working, and I think there's still some things to take away with and be encouraged about. And like Wolff said, I hope they're angry about it, and I hope they come out and can show some of that anger against San Jose and Houston.
Yeah, but Alex Ring, if you're listening, anger does not need to equate to a red card. You know, be mad,
Exactly.
but make good calls. Yeah, I agree. And maybe the one thing I'd add is I think this is a game where if you put the same teams out at the beginning of next season versus the end of this one, I think we win it, because I think our players are still playing with this burden of the results they've gone through and are still adjusting. And I think if they've got the fresh start and they can just go in a little more confidently, I think we finish a few of those chances. I think we get a little luckier. And I know it sounds kind of abstract, but I really do think if this game was replayed towards the beginning of next season versus the end of this one, it's a different result. And I'm curious to see what they look like after the season ends, when they have that fresh start and they don't have to kind of have this pressure of, oh, we've got, we're last, we've got so much we got to make up for every game.
All right, well, let's take a little break. We're going to come back after that and touch on some bits of Austin FC news, and we'll preview those games against San Jose and Houston that are coming up later this week. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. Chris, let's talk about some hot sauce.
Let's do it.
Teardrop Pepper Company has finally created the perfect recipe right here in Austin, Texas. Their all-natural, award-winning hot sauce has a delicious blend of flavor and heat, enhancing your favorite foods and leaving you wanting more.
Whether you like the zesty kick of golden habanero or garlicky smoothness of supreme serrano, it's the best way to spice up your Austin FC pre-match meals. Teardrop Pepper Company has 2 unique flavors available, and you can order them on their website, teardroppepepperco.com, or from their social media pages.
Use offer code GOAL, that's GOAL, to save 10% off your order. Put it on everything, they'll make more. We are back. We're going to jump into a little bit of Austin FC news. The first thing we're going to talk about is Ben Sweat. So he's apparently doing a little bit of light training. He tore his ACL. Was it the second game in the season, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, at LA.
Colorado.
Colorado was the third game. I think it was the... Oh, no, I don't know what it is. Well, yeah, it was against Colorado. You're right.
Here I was thinking you knew more than me. For a brief moment, you had me. Yeah, it was Colorado.
So, yeah, excellent to see him coming back. Yeah, I've said this before, but having him and Colemanich as options on that left side would be great, because Ben Sweat really did look pretty good in what little we saw him at the beginning of the season.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but can't he play center back as well?
I think he's played a little bit of center back. I think he would, like, maybe in like a back 3 setup, I think he would maybe be okay there. But
so if we're talking about center backs with a little more pace, even just as a rotation option, it could be a really nice piece moving forward. So it's definitely encouraging to see him come back.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that he's already on the roster, we're not going to spend a bunch of extra money on him or something. He's already here. So it'd be a great addition to have him back. Probably not going to see him this year, but to have him up to speed and fully healthy at the beginning of next season will be great.
The real worry with him, though, is he's getting healthy just in time for the expansion draft.
I know. Can he make it 3 years in a row?
I hope not. I would love it if he could stay, but the stars are aligning.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to hit on is we talked about the Kervin Arriaga rumors last week. Not long after that episode came out, there's some more reports saying that he was linked to Minnesota United. And so there hasn't been any other rumors about the connection to Austin FC. The only thing that came out was that maybe Austin holds his discovery rights, which would mean that if Minnesota wants to sign him, they just have to throw a little bit of money Austin's way, which after watching some more film of him, honestly don't think he's a good fit for what we need. And so I'm not sad to see that. And my hopes at this point are just that we can get some allocation money out of Minnesota if they decide to sign him.
Because you know what is a good fit for what we need? Money.
That's right.
Give me that cash, money. Minnesota.
Another thing I want to touch on is the academy. So I went out to see the U17s play this past Saturday. They're playing against Minnesota United, actually. So that it doesn't always line up to where they play the same team as the first team, but they were playing Minnesota United. I think the U17s beat them 8-1. They had scored 4 before halftime, but looked really good. And I think an interesting note there is that 2 of our players for the U17 team actually came from that Minnesota academy. So Minnesota's academy essentially decentralized, and they don't have a full-time academy under the Minnesota United umbrella. There's a lot of clubs that existed already. And instead of having their own academy, they essentially just pull in all-star teams from these existing clubs. And so all these kids flew to Austin, will play this game, and they'll go back home and split up again and go play with their individual clubs all across the state of Minnesota, which is the reason those 2 kids left Minnesota and came to Austin to play in a full-time academy. And I don't know if this one game is enough to base it on, but maybe you can see why that's not the ideal setup, because Austin FC absolutely demolished them.
Landon, do you feel like at this point, the amount of academy games you've gone to, it's fair to say you're their biggest fan?
I was thinking about this the other day. I have been to more academy games than anyone who's not an Austin FC employee or a parent of one of the players. I can say that confidently, I think.
I love that for you, man. I hope
which I haven't been to that many, to be fair, but
sure, Landon, sure. But I hope that whenever one of them breaks through the first team and scores the first academy goal in Austin FC history, they take their shirt off to reveal an undershirt that says, "It's all for you, Landon."
I try not to interact with them ever, because I still think it's a little bit weird that I'm a grown man with no connection to any of these kids going out and watching teenagers play soccer. But
I actually, you know what, to your credit briefly, and this is something I really love about our fan base in general. When I first got into soccer, one of the things that took me back the most with teams abroad is the ones that supported their youth system really, really passionately. Because I think that's just such a cool component that across the world is really rare. So I love seeing you or anyone else that goes out to support the kids. And I hope that down the road, it becomes a normalcy that, you know, maybe when they play a game against SC Dallas or Houston or just have a big game within their league, that we bring a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand fans out and really hype them up, you know, give them a taste like that. That's like a dream for me, is that we hit that level of support, because I think anywhere across the world that would be just highly respected. And I love that even now there's so much interest just in how the academy kids are doing. So you're starting the fire, Landon. I hope it grows.
One thing I do want to revisit from a past show is Owen Wolff. So because he is 2 days too old to play on that academy team, he's only allowed to play against the other MLS teams. And so the last few games I've gone to have been against non-MLS teams. And so Owen has not played any games. He did play in this Minnesota game. I don't know if he's maybe like getting fit because he hasn't been playing that many games, but he wasn't super involved in the whole game. There's the other kids who have been the standouts in every other game I've gone to were still the standouts. But watching Owen Wolff in the moments where he would go in for a tackle or carry the ball and make a driving run or make a little flick pass or a little turn. I can confidently say now that he is the most pro-ready player in the academy system. And so I just wanted to point that out because I know there's understandably so a lot of calls about nepotism for him being the first homegrown player. There are some other players in the system that may have a higher ceiling than Owen Wolff. They might end up being better players than Owen Wolff. But if you needed to put in any of the academy players into a first team game today, I'm picking Owen Wolff 10 times out of 10.
And Owen, if you're listening, that call for a celebration earlier applies to you as well. So if you get that first shot and you score a goal, you better have that shirt ready. I'll pass them out at the next academy game.
That's right, Owen. I remember that I believed in you. All right,
that's what the shirt should say is thanks for believing in me, Landon.
Let's jump into the San Jose preview. So that game is going to be Wednesday, October 20th at 9:30 p.m. It's a West Coast game, so it's going to be a little bit late here in Central Time. The San Jose is currently 10th in the West. They've lost 3 games in a row. The last 2 meetings with Austin FC, it was a 0-0 draw. That was the home opener here in Austin, if you'll probably remember that. And then the absolutely wild 3-4 comeback by San Jose not long ago. So there's both of the occasions have been a little bit. The first game was a little bit spicy, and then the second game was a lot spicy. And so it would be kind of interesting if there was like a little bit of a rivalry brewing between these two teams if the games keep going like they have the last 2.
Well, if Wolff knows what he's doing too, he's going to take that, pissed off feeling from the ref in this past game and mix in a little, hey, remember what they did to us last time they came down, and those guys are going to come out ready to fight, hopefully we see it. But you're right. That's a good point. It hopefully is. And even more so, an interesting note in this, I've heard that their head coach, Almeida, is kind of getting on the hot seat because they're slipping so far out of the playoff run. And while I love Matias Almeida and I wish him success in the world, I do love ending a coach's job. I love the opportunity to be the final nail in the coffin. And so, talk about rivalry. This is a good chance. Let's go finish him off. Let's get him out of here.
That would be pretty wild if we just embarrass them on Wednesday and he gets fired immediately afterwards. I'm not going to say that I think that will happen because Austin FC, right? But
don't say that. I don't want that to be a thing.
some players to point out here. I think one player to watch, maybe not a standout, but Christian Espinosa, who him and Kolmanich had a battle in that first game. And in the second game, he's the one who Bradley Stuver just demolished with that shoulder tackle after during that goal mouth brawl that happened after the penalty. So that'll be interesting to watch. La Chofis was the player of the month for all of MLS in September. The last few games haven't been great, but he was on fire for a while there. And then Jeremy Ebobisse, who we did not see in that last game because I believe he was just starting a little injury stint, but he's back from injury. So there's a chance that we see Ebobisse play in this game. On the Austin FC side, it's another 3-game week. It is a little bit more stretched out this time. The last time it was essentially 6 days. This time we're doing Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday. So it is a little bit more stretched out this time. That being said, we will expect to see some kind of rotation. What do we think that looks like in this window?
Well, it's interesting because I think the only thing Josh Wolff has said about it is exactly what you just pointed out, is it's not as congested of a 3-game week as the last few have been. And he kind of alluded to, we don't need to rotate as much. I do think obviously there still has to be some rotation. I would hope and kind of expect that Cecilio gets rotated, both kind of based on performance and just rest. And I would love to see some speed take over that spot. Personally, I'd love to see Gaines on the wing for once. And, or Gallagher would be fine. But, this is something I don't think people take enough note of is Gaines is not a striker before we signed him. He's a winger. And he had a nice moment in this last game too, in his brief cameo where he carried the ball out wide. And just when you thought he was caught out, he took it a few steps further to the end line and dished that cross in that got to Driussi's that really good chance at the end that he wasn't able to capitalize on. And so I would love to see Gaines get a full 90 on the wing and utilize that pace. And even more so, getting a bit into the tactics of it, is San Jose has that really distinct man marking system. And if you're smart, you find a way to pull the right guys out of position and kind of 1v1 those wingers and just send them through. And I don't know how much Josh Wolff's thinking about that tactically, but all to say, it seems like we're lined up well to have some good rotation on the wing and hopefully give one of those speedy guys a good shot.
I'm with you there. I would like to see that. I'm not sure if we will see it, just because Jite is likely going to need at least a little bit of rotation, even if that's playing 60 minutes and coming out. But we're still in the same pickle with not having any other strikers. And so I just don't know if you play Gaines on the wing, if you have to bring Jite out at any moment. I feel like he's probably still the only option there.
Well, I think that's a good point, because, and I hope that Josh Wolff doesn't bench Jite for this, because I get rotation. You want to keep guys healthy, but we've taken our sweet time getting Jite up to speed and getting him fully fit. But if you think about his timeline of when he stopped playing before we signed him and where he is now, he's kind of just had his full off season and is now back into what would have been a European schedule. He should be really fit at this point. And so I would love to give him 60 minutes in this. Let's play naturally and hopefully get an early lead and then just try to close out the game. And I think the best way to do that is his presence. Like we were talking about earlier, we don't have another player right now that can bring the same presence around the box. And I think we need that to start the game off strong and kind of take advantage, especially when you're playing away. So I hope that, we start someone like Gallagher or Gaines on the wing and keep Jite in that starting position. And maybe it's that whether Gaines starts or not, you just shift him into that or you sub him on into it. But I think it would be wise to start Jite again and just, it's not ideal to start a guy three games in a week, but if you sub him early, you certainly can. It's not unheard of. And I think if there's one player we need to keep on and should be fit enough to keep on right now, it's got to be him, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember which press conference it was. It might have been the midweek one last week. But when talking about rotation and talking about Gaines specifically, Wolff essentially said, like, Gaines is going to get some minutes. Some of that will be starting. Some of that will be on the bench. And for me, I read that as being him starting at striker, but maybe not. We'll see. The next game, which is going to be Saturday, October 24th at 4 p.m. is originally scheduled for.
Sorry, Landon, can I make one more point about San Jose before we move
go for
it? So this is really interesting. They're, like I said, they've got this man marking system, which is super bizarre in the world of soccer. And I think it was MLS Assist, which is a really good tactical podcast for anyone that doesn't listen to it. Like earlier on in the year, did a deep dive on their system and kind of how to beat it. And I believe one of the main points they made is the biggest wrinkle in that approach is if you have a center back that carries the ball forward, because it then forces, they have to leave one man unmarked and it's always one of the two center backs. So if you do that, it forces one guy to break their man mark and completely breaks apart the whole approach. And as we noted, we're starting to see Cascante all season has shown he can do that in the right moments. And now we're seeing Romaña's ability to do that. So it could be a really ideal chance for, if Wolff's team is studying that correctly, to say, hey, we want one of you to take the ball and move forward and make them break it. And then that's when we strike. And especially too, if you put speed up top, then it's right there for the taking, right?
So in the last San Jose game, it was Romaña, the man that they left unmarked. And so in the second half, that's when you started seeing attacking midfielder Jhohan Romaña, where he would make a run forward. And then as we were chasing the game, would just stay up there. And so I think you're right. And I think another little wrinkle that I noticed in that game was Alex Ring would start deep and maybe play a ball off and then make a run like forward into the midfield, trying to get one of the central midfielders to kind of chase him and open up some space there. So yeah, I think that's, now that we've seen it and kind of know what to look for, I think that's going to be a really interesting tactical matchup to watch and see what what they do to try to stifle us, and also what Wolff does to try to open up space, because you can do some kind of weird, interesting things to do that, and to try to break them down in ways that you probably wouldn't really try against other teams.
Yep. Basically, what we're saying is Romaña, hat trick of assist incoming.
Coast to coast, buries it from 25 yards.
Yep. All gas, no brakes with that man.
All right, let's do the Houston game. So as I was saying, it's going to be at 4 p.m. on Sunday. It was supposed to be at 3 p.m. initially. I think it got picked up on national TV is why it changed, but Houston is currently in 11th place. They're 2 points ahead of FC Dallas, 5 points ahead of Austin. And so they actually beat the Sounders 2-1 the other day. Darwin Quintero scored a really nice goal. I don't know if you saw that one or not, Chris, but it was definitely worth watching the replay of.
I do not watch Houston Dynamo highlights. No, so I did not see the goal.
But Quintero, he had a good game against us last time we played them. Maybe, I think that would be my vote for the worst Austin FC game of the season. I know we have a lot of strong candidates in that category, but I think that's my vote for the worst game of the season. Quintero has kind of continued that run of form, has been really good in a lot of games over the last little stretch. Urruti has had some good games. Pico has continued to have some good games. Corey Baird has had a few good games. So they're not always winning it, but those guys have been dangerous. And those are the kinds of guys who are dangerous against a team like Austin FC if we're not careful.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the big change I've noticed in Houston's form as they've kind of gotten on a little hot streak lately is Quintero, right? Like they're including him more. He's taking advantage of the moment. He's playing like a DP. And I think to that credit, that's kind of seems like the key to beat them is you got to take him out of the game. And considering rotation as well, you know, I've said it before, I've given Wolff a lot of criticism. I hope he prioritizes if he has to the Houston game, but I think there's a way to rotate where, you know, whether it's Ring and Pochettino or Pereira and Pochettino or Ring and Pereira, but keep both of those guys a little further back than normal and have one of them really eliminate the passes to Quintero, take him out of the game, don't let him create, and just clog that space in the middle a little bit more. So I think there's a way to rotate effectively this week to where you can have a stronger midfield maybe in that game that's a little more defensive focused to really take away their key creator. And knowing too, you know, Houston is so scary on the break because of guys like Pico. And so I think if you tuck in a little more, you don't have to worry about those 1v1 breakaways, right? So hopefully that's the approach. That's certainly what I would do. And if Josh Wolff reads all my text messages to him, he knows that's what he should do. But it'll be interesting to watch kind of how they approach that, because I think Quintero is kind of the key and they know it. And so we'll see how they treat him in that game.
So one thing, I watched a little bit of the replay today of that last Houston game. And one thing I was watching for is what we were doing defensively against them. And I realized because we gave up a goal in the first minute that we were maybe pressing a little bit harder than we would have otherwise. But since that game, it seems that Wolff has really settled in on this kind of 4-4-2 mid block in the defense. And in that game, it seemed to be that we were doing more of like a 4-3-3 and pressing a little bit harder. And so my hope is that we stick with what we've been doing in the last few games. We've been successful, and in defense, be a little bit more in that 4-4-2 mid block and just not give them the opportunity to counter on us by pressing and losing the ball, or pressing and like letting them slice through us, like has happened so many times. So that would be my hope on the defensive side of the ball. I think offensively, we need to just try to control this game. I don't think there was ever a moment where, even though we had 60+% possession in that game, it never felt like we were in control of anything.
Yeah, I think too that if we put in a performance like we did this weekend against Minnesota, against Houston, we should win, because they're not Minnesota. You know, it's a good example of a slightly lesser opponent that if you play at that level, you should walk away with 3 points. And especially after, you know, I remember Wolff seemed pretty ashamed after that Houston loss. So hopefully that's another one that he's really going to hype him up for, right? Like there's a lot of pride to take back from that. And so I feel I'm really excited to watch that game, not just because it's a good state rival, but just because there's some interesting tactical components, but also like if we keep playing at this level and this team we're seeing now that's a little more settled and a little more full strength, this is a good game to test. Like that's a game you need to win. And San Jose is a game that you could win, right? So it's going to be a fun week to see. Like if we're really at that level, there should be points on the table for us to take.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up, Chris?
The only thing, and just because I haven't officially said it on the podcast, happy birthday, Landon. Hope you had a good
thanks,
one.
Chris. Thanks. All right. We want to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We also want to ask you to continue the conversation with us on Twitter. We've had a lot of fun on Twitter today. I'm at LVAhero87. Chris is at
Chris Wellhausen.
Oh, easy one.
That's it. Yeah.
And then you can find the show at Moon Tower Soccer on both Twitter and Instagram. Visit the Striker Texas website. Have you read any articles that you would want to pitch on there? I kind of sprung that on you last minute.
Yeah, and it's okay because I'm an avid reader. And honestly, I really, really enjoyed the joint mailbag between Chris Bills and Phil West. I thought that was so much fun. And not just because Phil gave me a shout out in it. But it really, like, I think mailbag kind of reads aren't always super entertaining, but they both do such a good job of really diving deep in the questions they're asked. And I really liked it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We will be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer. We're going to review both of those games we just talked about, and then we'll preview the Copa Tejas match against FC Dallas. And if we beat Houston, this is something we failed to mention. If we beat Houston, then essentially the Copa Tejas championship is that game against Dallas. So even though we're out of the playoffs, there's still a little bit of something to play for here.
You better believe if we win that, I will never shut up about it on Twitter until next season. So there's a lot on the line here, boys.
But if we lose it, then it's a small trophy. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We'll be back next week. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Chris Wellhausen.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around. Muchas gracias. Bye bye.